Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about policy change in reference to eliminating coercive interrogation techniques in police interviews and interrogations. The first slide you see is just an overview of what we're going to be going over in the next few minutes. It shows every step of the policy planning and how we're going to get to that end result. So the first thing we need to look at is, why does it matter? Why do we need to change this policy? So, to look at some statistics, since 1992, over 25% of convictions overturned by DNA were connected to false confessions. These type crimes were going to be murder or rape. That is because at most of these crime scenes, you are going to find DNA evidence and can later be used to be tested in these cases. However, 13% of cases that were overturned without DNA were also connected to false confessions. These type of crimes could be thefts, robberies, burglaries, anything like that where DNA is not normally found. Also, we have to understand that many times cases never make it to this point of being tried by a judge or jury. Most of the time, cases are pled out with plea agreements well before a court date, because the defendant can recognize that they're going to get less time with a plea agreement than they are if they go in front of a judge or jury. So, to look at the history of false confessions, Brown versus Mississippi was a court case that actually went to the Supreme Court of the United States. In this case, they ruled that police cannot use physical assault or torture to obtain a confession. So after this date, police moved from physical coercion to psychological coercion in interrogations. Next, let's look at the causes of false confessions. So there are different causes of false confessions, such as psychological disorders. Also, being a juvenile and having limited mental capacity can also be a cause of false confessions. There are also three types of false confessions. Voluntary, which means a person accepts responsibility willingly for a crime they did not commit. That is normally done if a person is trying to impress someone or take responsibility for this heinous crime that occurred to try to gain some kind of fame for it. Coerced compliant. This is when the person is trying to escape the interrogation by complying with what the interviewer wants to hear. A lot of times you will find this with juveniles. They'll be in an interrogation and they think, if I just tell the interrogator what they want to hear, then they'll stop and I can go home. So that is your second type. And then the third type is going to be coerced internalized. So this is when a person actually begins to believe they committed the crime. Most of the time, there's going to be some kind of underlying mental disability or mental issue with the person being interrogated. So these last two types of confessions, the coerced compliant and coerced internalized, are more often connected with false confessions when it comes to coercive interrogation techniques. So we moved to the Miranda intervention. Some believe this was going to be what ended false confessions, is that the police has to read you your Miranda warnings, which means you have a right to remain silent, you have the right to counsel, you have a right to stop answering at any time. However, there are some problems with that. You have the problem that sometimes people do not understand their Miranda warnings. So, especially with juveniles or those with intellectual disabilities, they may not fully understand their rights and waive them without counsel. Then you have stress, just the stress of being in an interrogation room with an interrogator, being charged with a crime that you didn't commit. It has been found that even an average adult will cave and waive their Miranda warnings under this stress. And then it's also been proven that over 80% of people brought into an interrogation waive their Miranda rights. And there's been several reasons behind this. One reason is because they don't want to look guilty. They think if they request an attorney, they're going to look guilty. The second is because the interviewer doesn't stress the importance of the Miranda warning. And thirdly is because if an innocent person walks in, they don't feel the need to have an attorney with them. So at that point, they waive their Miranda warning. So let's look at the effect of trying to correct the problem. Who would be affected by this change? So this change would affect everyone within a police department from the ground up. Uh, this would affect your officers and your investigators because they would have to learn a new style of interrogation and interview. They would also have to continue their investigation even if they obtained a confession, because a lot of the new interrogation techniques, they tell you that even if you obtain a confession, you need to continue the investigation and try to obtain some sort of evidence to back that up. Police administration. So the police administration, they're going to be responsible for developing the new policy, training officers, and worrying about budgetary costs. Then you look at your prosecuting attorneys and the courts. So the courts tend to put more weight on confessions than they actually do physical evidence and testimony of witnesses. And then you also have to look at the recorded interviews. So recorded interviews is going to allow the prosecution, defense, and the courts to fully understand what goes on inside of an interview room. Then we have to look at the barriers to change. So what are some barriers that we are going to come up against with changing? Again, police administration. They're going to have to face this change, and for some of them, it's going to be very difficult. For police officers and investigators, they always say, hey, we've always done it this way. True, we might have always done it this way, but sometimes it needs to change. Then you have budgetary restrictions. I think every police department in America has issues right now with their budgets. So you're going to have to consider, your budgetary restrictions. That's going to be a huge barrier. Next, we are going to show our goals and objectives for this new policy. So the first goal is going to be to establish a new interrogation model that all employees will utilize. The second goal is going to be eliminate the use of older coercive techniques, including the Reid technique, and interrogations to diminish the possibility of false confessions. So agency collaboration is going to be huge when you're trying to implement a new policy. So one agency that you're going to want to collaborate with is going to be your local training academy. They can often provide guidance on new interrogation methods because of their connections with other academies and agencies. Plus, they can provide space for the training once it's been selected and secured. Other local agencies, they may have already put new methods in place and can offer their guidance and implementation and how their department has accepted the change. They may be able to also offer assistance in easing in on the transition with the department. And your local Commonwealth's attorney. So the Commonwealth's attorney can assist in ensuring that all parties are protected with the new method, both the officer and the suspect. They can also provide guidance with the legality of the new method and any problems they foresee that could arise. Finally, they can give feedback on their thoughts on the new method and their believed effectiveness of this new method. So intervention and design. So the research already shows that there's a connection between the coercive interrogations and false confessions. So therefore, we know something needs to happen. So how are we going to do this? So our training coordinator is going to be the one who organizes our dates and times for trainings. They are going to make sure that all of our existing department employees receive the training, plus our new hires. Training logs are going to be kept by the training coordinator. It will show that all sworn employees have been trained. Any untrained officers will not be able to lead interrogations. Plus, updates will be shared department-wide as soon as they are made. Proposed costs. So the proposed costs, the first one we have is the training facility. We have to look at where are we going to hold this. So if the training academy agrees So the training academy is going to agree to provide the space for this training. So the department doesn't have to secure another facility, and this would be free of cost. The next would be the training fee. So this training fee is going to be covered by the officers department and the city. So normally a training fee from the academy would be covered by each department represented at the training, because this training would be open to other departments. Departments that are members with the training academy do not pay this fee. And DCJS has also agreed to provide in-service training hours for each officer that successfully completes the course. Next, we have instructor fees and expenses. So this is going to be split between the department and the training academy. So these fees, such as travel, lodging, and meals, is going to be split because the course may be part of a regular training that the academy will want to add to their schedule. So this may benefit them also. Then we have to look at the officers' overtime for them to go to this training. So the city has agreed to pay any overtime for the officers if they do not want to take comp time instead. So next you can see the timeline and responsibilities for what needs to happen. So researching the new method, selecting the new method, contacting the instructor, coordinate with the training academy on availability, schedule the training, and then to begin training new officers. So of course, not everyone is going to be as receptive to this as, I apologize, not everyone is going to be as receptive to this new idea as everyone else. So the first thing that can happen is that the chief of police and the training coordinator has a meeting with each shift. They're going to present the topics. They're going to tell them why they are wanting to do this and let them know they understand it's not going to be an overnight transition. While they are there, they're going to let these officers speak their minds on the subject and then present facts and incidents to where the officers can clearly understand why the department is making this change. Implementation and monitoring. So we're going to ensure that all officers are trained. Next, we're going to ensure that all interviews and interrogations are recorded. We're also going to make sure that supervisors are monitoring these interrogations within reason. We know that a supervisor is not always going to be available. Plus, the chief of police will randomly review interrogations to ensure that we are adhering to the new policy. There will also be monthly meetings of supervisors to where they will pull and review random interrogations. This will help to make sure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to this new policy. Make sure we're all looking at the same thing. And then changes to the policy. So if something comes up and something in this policy does need to be changed, it can be changed. We just need to make sure that every department member is notified immediately before any part of this changes, so they will know what is changing. Next, we have policy evaluation. So evaluation of this policy must be a longitudinal impact evaluation using time series analysis. Data collected from before the policy was implemented will be used to determine if this change is effective. Close attention should be given to data including interrogations of juveniles and those with limited mental capacities. This could be a true measure of whether the new policy works as expected. The evaluation would be conducted by an outside entity to ensure that there is no bias towards the department and to receive accurate information. When the evaluation has been completed, the results are to be shared with all stakeholders in this process. This would include the department members, city leaders, other agencies, and training academies. Sharing this information may influence other departments or training academies to look at their own interrogation policies. Lastly, the results will also be shared with the public to show transparency of the department. This will prove to the public that this department is attempting to right a wrong in the use of coercive interrogation techniques. By informing the public, they can also help push for interrogation reform and reduce the number of false confessions obtained in the United States. Thank you very much.